Okay, this is the second in an installment of how to evaluate exchange rates. Now, to illustrate why it's important, I'm going to open a featured project finance model, and I have something called currencies in solar model. Okay, now in this model, if I can remember it, I hope I can. I haven't. I wonder if anybody's ever looked at this, including myself. But we could put a local currency in the operating expense, or we could make the operating revenues, hang on, in local currency and the debt in foreign currency. Okay. I don't know what happened with the local currency revenue. I'm sure there's a reason for this. Why didn't make any difference. Now we could either put in evaluating the risks associated with different things. We could either put kind of a devaluation relative to the. We could put a simple PPP exchange rate in purchasing power parity, or we could kind of put a devaluation or kind of a devaluation and appreciation and a devaluation above the local currency. And then you kind of get different answers depending on how you do things. Okay, I think now I've got some differences. Okay, and if our expenses are in local currency and foreign currency, this isn't kind of as dramatic as I wanted it to be. You can see the local currency debt is a lot different than the foreign currency debt. But in order to do this, the key assumption, one of the key assumptions is to go and put some different devaluations relative to the PPP exchange rate, to the purchasing power exchange rate, where the purchasing power exchange rate, let me now go to the one we're talking about, is this one. Here we have this kind of purchasing power exchange rate. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you how to really use the indirect function together with I don't know, some lookup functions and other things, but it's really a lot about using the indirect function. And just to illustrate this, here the PPP for Mexico was above so we had a kind of appreciation. In this case, if we started it earlier, it was a little different. If we take another country, let's take Malaysia. I have no idea what's going to happen here. Let's take Malaysia, CPI, and then we have in 97 kind of the big change. So this, we could see what kind of percent real devaluation we had. And what I tried to show you with that other model, it really does make a big difference. So the rest of the video is just going to be a lot of mechanics about building this, but this is the kind of final result now. Of course, if you started a different time period, you could get a different answer. So this is not an easy thing to evaluate here. It kind of stayed nice and stable. Okay, all right, and now we'll just look at the video. Now maybe you think I'm kind of idiotic. I don't use the pivot tables very much. I've tried. They're of course very good. Some people are dramatic believers in the pivot table. There's Power Pivot and Power BI and all that stuff. It is good. Now, this young woman, she told me long ago, use the indirect function. I thought, well, who cares about that indirect function? Why are you obsessed with that? She was, of course, absolutely correct. This is a perfect example of using the indirect function, okay? So what we're going to do in this video is just see how we can start to collect the data from all of these different places and kind of look at the different places that have a PPP exchange rate. In other words, the exchange rate isn't perfectly explained by inflation. And when it's not explained by inflation, if you have I said PPA, I think. I meant PPP. I'm thinking about PPAs. PPAs are power purchase agreements. If you have them stated in, for example, US dollars or indexed to US dollars, and the exchange rate doesn't follow the inflation rate, you can get big real changes in the real price of electricity. If the exchange rate follows the inflation rate, excuse me, that was kind of bad, I needed a drink. If the exchange rate, not just a drink of water. If the exchange rate follows the inflation rate, I need a drink of other things too, then, okay, we index it to the USD and it goes up when the exchange rate goes down or vice versa, but the price goes up. The price of the PPA goes up, but so what? That's not so what, but it just goes up along with inflation. That's why looking at some of these things in different places is worthwhile. Now, if you want to get this, now one of the things to put this data together will be to find when the start date and end date is right, because when we're going to compute the PPP exchange rate, we're going to have to start at some point. I don't know how you can do it otherwise. I'm sure some fancy economist can do it some other way. So we're going to find finding the start and the end date will be crucial. Now, if we put the start date as the minimum, you remember that's in column A, and then you put indirect right after that, not index, indirect. And then you say, okay, well, let's look at this file. But before we do that, double quote, single quote, double quote, and sign. You should start getting fast at it. And then F4 twice, 3 times. And then double quote, single quote, or double inverted comma, double inverted comma, and point d'exclamation, point of exclamation, A:A. That's where we're going to get it from. That's the minimum date. That's where we start with. And did I forget this? Okay. You just do it like this. Let's try it with a maximum. Max, indirect. And then you go double inverted comma, single inverted comma, double inverted comma, and sign, F4 3 times, and sign, double inverted comma, single inverted comma, point d'exclamation, A, the column again. Okay, there we go. You can just copy this all the way down and it'll tell for every single series that you read in. I read them all in. I should have told you that. It read them in fairly quickly. Very quickly, really. And then we have that. Now, on each of the pages you read in, right at the top, there's kind of a nice little description. Maybe the rest of the crap didn't work really well, but you like the title. Remember, we can make a function. I'm not going to waste the time because I've shown you this too many times. Go to read all. Assign the macro. Edit. Go all the way down. And in the bottom, I put this standard little function that says go get add text. Go to the series and count how many numbers are in the series, and then take that series and put a space back in it because you took it out with that little, text to columns thing. So at least for that one. And then we do the same sort of thing even with a function we made ourselves. We go, okay, well, let's put equal add text, but then put indirect and do a standard double inverted comma, single inverted comma, double. a song I could sing, but I'm a shitty, bad singer. F3, F4 twice, double inverted comma single, exclamation point. No, yeah, exclamation point, excuse me. Should be faster. And then I'll put B1 to L1, just because I did it wrong at first, but that gives you the, and then you just copy it down and you get a nice little thing with all the names on them. Look how fast it copied too. All right, that's that. That's the indirect function. Pretty good, I think. Now you use the indirect function even more. I am not going to waste too much time telling you that you can go to the developer tab and insert a drop down box or a spinning box. So let's say it's 1984, that is my start year for the analysis. And the start year is going to be really important because you're going to, in making the PPP, how about we'll do that, PPP exchange rate is the rate, exchange rate, and I'm not going to put the T in a subscript, T minus 1, how about T minus 1 like that, times the 1 plus the local inflation divided by the 1 plus the USD inflation. Now the reason I told you that is because we have to define T minus 1. If we define this at different periods, we're going to get a different result to see the deviations in the PPP exchange rate relative to the actual inflation rate. Okay, so here's, I gave you a little peek. I shouldn't have done that. Very bad, very bad, very bad. Now okay, so I said, okay, well, we might want to start this in different periods. So we right click as usual, go to the silly little thing here. We'll start with 1950 or something. But we don't go to 2015, something like that, or 2016, go to another sheet, back to the same sheet as Tatiana from Gazprom Bank told me to do, and then we're changing that one, and just a minute. Okay, this one I changed in a different way. Give me a pause, okay? Okay, that was bad. I should have made a format control on the cell link here on this one, okay? And I started that with 1 to 60, and then this was an index function that takes this and goes down, and then we can either change our year here, which we really want a much earlier year, okay, or we can change it somewhere else. Now, we can also define the periods per year, quarterly, annual, monthly, and then all of this is doing the same sort of thing, except going to this page and basically selecting all of this stuff and saying, okay, which one of these do you want to select? All right. And once we've done that, then we're going to go to this summary page. I didn't mean to show you the analysis, and we'll use the indirect function again. Now, don't worry about this one. I'm just kind of showing you what we did this time. I'm not having you work through it all. Okay, you go and you press indirect, and you use the lookup function with the indirect. I tend to use the match and the index too much when I don't have to. As long as the dates are in ascending order, it's faster to use the lookup function.
and you just use the lookup function and you look up the date, and then you go to the particular file and look in A for the corresponding date and B for the corresponding number. And then we put a little switch to say, well, this thing could either be, the way I did it, it could either be a actual inflation rate. This one that was an inflation rate. Yes, this one we had a really big inflation rate in 1998 and 1999. And then that's what we use for the inflation. So you just take that away and then you just divide this by 100. So all this is an if statement that says if we put it as true, then we assume it's an index and we take the log. We take the log of this one divided by last one. If it's not true, you just divide the thing by 1,000. All right? Then we get the consumer price index for the US, and we can do the same thing. Okay, so this time we get the consumer price index. Okay, and this is using the indirect function. These days I'm kind of splitting these things up, and we've used the text function. Well, why don't we do this? We'll do one more thing. I did a flexible timing. So here's the thing I don't want to do. We're going to get the exchange rate. This is the Indonesia exchange rate, the CPI for the inflation rate, and we want to make sure we don't start before any of our series start. So we take the maximum of either the number we put in, which is really the number which will guide anything, but if that number is too old and we don't even have the data, we better go backwards. So if this number we put in here, this thing here we put in was 1950, well, we still should start in 1967 because that's the first date we had one of the series. And then what you do is you just take that last year you started with and then increment it by either the 12, or if it's quarterly, you'd increment it by 3. You just use the EO month for doing that. EO month, EO month, EO month. That's a good one for just setting up a really flexible date. Okay, I'm going to put it back to annual. Okay, and that's just a lookup function that looks up on the annual. That's kind of a perfect way to do it. Now, the other thing we can do is do the same sort of thing and say, well, let's look at the last year we have. And I'm going to take one away from it so we don't go too far. If we don't have it, here in whenever it was, excuse me, what happened? So I stop here in 2015, and after 2015, here's what we do. We just say, okay, well, if it's true, and this true just says, take these 2 years, take the year of the date, and make sure it's greater than the first year and less than or equal to the last year. Okay, and then put a true and false, and then you can use the NA function, the very, very, very famous NA function. Okay, I'm going to stop the video right now, and we're going to show you a couple of different results from this, because I think that's the key, really. The next video, I hope, will be a little more about the theory and a little less about just making the Excel all work.